Start the old streamy stream. Hey everybody, Chris Courtney, New Pragmatic. So good to have you along. Needing to jump over here really quickly and I'll load up today's presentation on system ethics. Really excited about the second iteration of this talk. Going to give everybody just a second to load on in here. And to get the live stream up and running. Should be on the YouTubes right about now. Not seeing it yet though. There it is. Gonna hop in here and see what we've got. Just give you a little quick note. Hi everyone. And we'll get this one underway. All right. Get this in full screen mode. Oh, I'll have to jump back out and try it again. Full screen. There we are. All right, so today we're going to be, should back that up. So in this session, we're going to be jumping into the real crux of what modern design is all about. And it's where the work you're performing, it has to do a lot of things that stretch beyond what something looks like. And it used to be that the first step away from the old school mentality of what design is was the step away to say, hey, you know what? Let's focus less on what it looks like and focus more on what it's trying to do. What problem is it trying to solve? And we've taken a step even further upstream now to really begin asking ourselves, okay, I know you're trying to solve that problem, but is that problem something that is going to ultimately benefit the users, the society that they're part of, or is it going to be a negative detractor to the people that are involved? And this is where systems and ethics and design really come into collision with one another. And then there's another name up there too. Name a lot of you may be familiar with. Name's Edward Snowden. And back in 2013, 2014, Edward Snowden leaked a lot of classified files. And I want to talk a bit today about why he might have done that and how that fits into our realm of good design thinking, good design ethics, good systems management. There's a lot of reasons to applaud such efforts, even if you disagree with what he did. You may agree with why he did that. So with that said, my name is Chris Courtney. I'm the founder here at newpragmatic.com. I've been a designer for, God, it seems like forever. You're probably wondering why this, why now, and ultimately it comes back to that core of design. As Steve Jobs said, and honestly, hundreds of other design leaders have said, design is how it works. So we're moving away from that core mentality that design is all visual. And as we've moved from more of a visual to an experience mentality about what design is, how it works, we begin to see that visual component shrinking in the grand scope of things. And I don't have any doubt you have peers, you have bosses that still think of design as that pixel that you push around the screen, or that or that dot that you push around the printed page. Really, it's more of the experience. At least that's where it should be right now. And as you begin to look at things from the guise of an interface designer, they see the experience part, they see the visual part, and they also see more upstream in how these components all come together to handle a user experience that is something that somebody interacts with. Now, honestly, modern design is way bigger than that. Modern design concerns itself with the systems that are impacted. And if you look here on the screen, you'll notice that there's a lot of circles that are getting smaller and smaller and smaller as the scope of design gets larger. So really, as designers, we have to stop looking at our belly buttons. And I want to take a moment to retract that, because navel gazing does not mean lazy. It does not mean self-absorbed. Navel gazing is actually a means of reflection. It's a means of meditation. So what we should really do is, instead of worrying about being self-absorbed, we should broaden our view. We should broaden our view of what design is. Zooming out allows us to focus on not just the work that we are working on, but how that work fits into the broader scheme, the larger system. And when we think of it that way, we alter and create systems of our own. So we need to be aware that these things that we're creating can be political. And I say that because design itself is political. This is an example that I wasn't looking for, but it immediately smacked me in the face. So remember that navel gazing comment a bit ago. As you can see, I did actually find the belly button shot, but I found a lot of other shots. What might strike you as odd is that Google doesn't think that people of color have belly buttons, or at least that's what this search result told me. And I tested this because I was certain it was just my search results were filtering. So I turned off my localized search results and went for a global perspective, one not tethered to my user profile, and this is what I ended up with for belly buttons. Not a belly button of color among them. So if a basic search in itself can be political in what it shows you, you can imagine that this happens quite frequently. The fact that Google's tagging African Americans as gorillas shouldn't shock you. That is a political statement. It's a racist statement, but it's a political statement. It's built into the platform. So, who our designs include and exclude are political acts, which is why your team shouldn't look like this. And rather, your team should look something more like this. That's actually me, that's fat version of me with hair. And I took it completely for granted that this is what teams look like. This is the team that I was part of back in 2005. Okay, we're talking 14 years in the past. But this young lady had the foresight, she was my boss at the time, had the foresight to put together a very diverse team. This is also what happens when women are in charge. They think about stuff like this. So if you want to have a diverse team, maybe put a woman in charge. The people in the room that are making the products matter. Diversity does matter, particularly when we're talking about how the things you're designing are going to impact the systems around that particular product or problem. So with that, let's talk about systems. So You may be asking yourself, or you may have already jumped to the conclusion that you know what a system is and the extremities of it. But according to Donella Meadows, and this is her book right here, Thinking in Systems, it's fantastic. I've highlighted it for everybody. A system is an interconnected set of elements that is organized in a way that achieves something. That is her definition of a system. So we have elements, we have interconnections, and then we have a function or purpose. What is the function of the thing that we're trying to do? What is the purpose of the thing that we are trying to do? What is the purpose of this organization of things? How are they connected? These are all systems questions. So when I take this example of a system, we have a mobile app, we have a restaurant, we have a parking lot. These seem like really radically different things. They are obviously connected via the restaurant, but one is like technology, and the other two are really space. In this example, we're going to see that systems impact one another and how they overlap. So these are connected systems. A parking lot and a restaurant are connected systems. Now, a common business problem is how to unlock capacity. And this is where you're commonly going to get questions from your marketing or sales team. I have this thing, it's not operating at capacity. How can we use technology to fix this? So we have the restaurant not at capacity, mainly because the parking lot is full. The parking lot is not as large as the restaurant, so the restaurant can't be fully utilized. So we introduce the mobile app. All right. Now the mobile app unlocks or potentially unlocks the capacity of the restaurant. However, the mobile app, if left unchecked, could negatively impact that restaurant by surges, momentary spikes, outstripping the capacity of the restaurant and diminishing the overall service for not only people getting deliveries from the mobile app, but the people also in the restaurant. So we can't just add a mobile app to the restaurant to unlock capacity without thinking about the negative impacts that are possible by adding this piece to the system. So it's also important to realize that systems often exist inside of other systems. The classic example is the city. And cities in and of themselves, I'm here in Chicago, cities are huge. Cities are massive. A town or city of 30,000 people still has a lot of complexity to it. There's school districts inside of it. There's waste and water management inside of that. Police, hospitals, all these complex systems inside of that city trying to operate. And the city itself is likely trying to operate inside of another organizational structure here in the United States is known as a county. And that is trying to operate inside of a state, which is trying to operate inside of a nation, which is trying to operate on a global scale. So you can see that it's very easy to scale these things up. And there's all these little systems that exist inside of one another. So the entire planet itself is a system of systems. The components that Donella Meadows covers inside of her book are known as stocks, flows, and feedback. Now, feedback is commonly referred to as feedback loops, but there's a couple of different types of feedback loops that we're going to cover here. So the illustration here, the diagram here, is basically the common two-sided market. Almost every business that you've ever heard a startup pitch is really a two-sided marketplace. You have two inflows creating a stock, and out of that you have an outflow. So an example of this would be Uber. Uber is the stock. You have drivers and demand coming in from two sides, and revenue generated is derived from those two by Uber. So you have these fluctuating loops on both sides of that, though. You have drivers and their availability constantly moving, And you have demand. Demand is moved by a couple of things. Demand is moved by a lot of things. There's lots of other little loops operating within this. A few of those would be weather, time of day, and then other events that might be happening in town. There's lots of things that dictate demand. So on one side of this, we have a very positive thing that can happen. So Uber has a lot of drivers. Uber has more drivers than they have demand. When Uber first started, it was like a black car service, and every ride was like $40. Very expensive. As they got more drivers, they had to figure out, well, how do we generate more revenue? How do we put all this capacity to work? So they came up with other tiers of the service. So it no longer was a black car only. Then you had UberX and Uber Pool, and miraculously, revenue was generated by offering lower prices. This obviously made demand go up because people now saw that it was more affordable. And as you can see here, this is from Quartz. The company has dropped fares by 20% or more in some cities, with an emphasis on reducing fares through UberX. In Orange County, fares will fall by as much as 30%. So this is a way that the system Uber created works very well. And I want to really point out that that systems can go in two different directions. So by on one side of this, Uber worked very well. On the other side, you can have that fluctuating loop flip into a runaway loop. The common thing that happens is something that would cause a citywide runaway loop would be bad weather. Okay? A storm blows in, it's going to be raining all night, it's going to be snowing all night. Lots of people want their Ubers. All right? So that creates a runaway loop of demand. It just continues to go up. The longer the storm, the more backpiled of a weight that occurs. Now, what does Uber do with that? Well, they have surge pricing. And surge pricing is a way to break that runaway loop, because at some point people will say, I'm not paying $50 to go 3 blocks. So that is a way to deal with the runaway loop. But it also generates a crap load of money. All right, let's make no bones about it. Uber makes a lot of money off that. Some of these instances are very logical. New Year's Eve, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., Uber is going to be very expensive. And there's nothing wrong with that. That they own that market. If you want to wait for a taxi cab, you can. But if you want to use Uber and reserve your ride, it's going to cost a lot of money. I personally am not impacted by this because I choose to spend my New Year's Eves and other holidays in ways that don't make me rely on such a service. These things can get out of hand. Uber surge pricing snafu results in shocking $14,000 charge. That's pretty bad. So you don't want to end up in a situation like that. But is that unethical? Not necessarily. The question that I would hope the folks at Uber would have asked before they started putting in surge pricing would be, what's causing the demand? If demand is setting the price, what's driving demand? And there's nothing unethical about making money off of people when it's New Year's Eve and you know everybody's going to want a cab. But when you have surge pricing kick in during a terrorist attack and you're making money because of a tragedy that is occurring, that's deeply unethical. And this would be forgivable, honestly, if it only happened once. But it happens again and again. Now, we can get into discussions of why terrorism is bad, But somebody at Uber had to be thinking, what are the things that are going to drive demand, and how are we going to protect against profiteering in moments of crisis? And these things are not always just freak terrorism attacks. Hurricane Sandy was one of the first examples of this in 2012. Notice something else. If Hurricane Sandy in 2012 was one of the first examples, why is Uber still struggling with this in 2017? It's easy. Because it's not a problem they really want to solve. They could solve it. They probably have to solve it for hurricanes, weather disasters. But terrorism strike happens, make a little money on the side. And it's this two-sided dynamic. We have an example of where Uber is made good and dropped prices for people, and that's a genuinely good thing. And on the other side, we see them continually profiteering off of disasters that happen to people. Same system, two radically different outcomes. The constant apology, it was a system error, that is not an excuse. It might have been okay or even somewhat acceptable the first time, but the fifth and sixth time it occurs, it's no longer an excuse. We know that we're required to do better than that, but yet we continue to let these things happen. So when a system is continually being abused, we have to step in, especially as designers. This is our job, our duty. We have to step in and claim ownership of that situation and bang the table and demand better. Or we have to just refuse our labor. Refusing your labor is a strategy here. You know, Google, when the Me Too crisis happened, and Google was found paying out executives millions of dollars because of sexual harassment claims, the employees at Google walked out. And I'll get into some strategies for how you can enact change at your organizations in just a little bit. First, I want to take us over to ethics, because that systems discussion really bleeds perfectly into a discussion of ethics. It wasn't too long ago, this was the ethos, and not just of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley may have been where this started, but I guarantee you that here in Chicago and other tech hubs around the world, everybody followed the Zuckerberg statement of move fast and break things. How many books were written with that as the basic tagline? Turns out that's a really terrible way to do business. When the fail well, this is you may or may not remember this, when Twitter was just getting started, they used to have this comically frequent service outage, and the fail well would appear. Regardless of how you feel about Twitter, you have to admit that when this is something breaking, it's pretty adorable. Oh, Twitter's out again. Oh, there's the fail whale. I guess we'll have to go take a coffee break or something. That's an adorable thing that failed. But when your service ends up broadcasting tragedy globally as it's happening from the point of view of the person committing the crime, that is devastating. That shot was from the New Zealand Muslim mosque shootings that just happened earlier this year. Notice I did not take a screen capture of the video, which is easy to find, because I want us focusing on the real impact of those moments. This person clearly is grieving whether it was a loved one she had that was killed, or it was just the overall trauma of what happened in her town in New Zealand. It's equally devastating. And our platforms can't be used to spread that kind of hate. And I apologize. Victor Papanek, another book, and I have to blame Mike Montero for turning me on to design it for the real world. Victor Papanek said, "You're responsible for what you put into the world," and that is never more true than today. Jack Dorsey here created a system for sharing what you're eating for lunch. And now, the question is that system aiding the spread of hate speech? And the answer is, well, of course it is. He has to go on record every other day defending this or that. The President of the United States using Twitter to threaten countries like Iran and North Korea. Of course he is having to defend hate speech. Mark Zuckerberg created a system for figuring out if somebody's dating somebody or not on his college campus. Now the question is that system being used to commit genocide? And of course it is. The reason these bad things keep happening is nobody is asking the right questions at the inception point of when we're creating the damn system. Peter Thiel. Oh, my favorite person. You know, the problem with Palantir, which is his company, is that from the onset, it was set to do some pretty bad things. So, unfortunately, I feel like he might have known the answer to this question at the word go. Is your system being used to separate children from their families? And the answer to that is, of course it is. Building databases for the government is always going to be a tricky problem to solve. Do you take on such a task? Microsoft said no. And then some asshat like Peter Thiel walks up. Says, sure, I'll take that money. And of course, that's not the only problem related to Peter Thiel. Did you use your own related companies to interfere in a public election? Of course he did. Whether it's using the money to pay for the Cambridge Analytica data or connecting it with Facebook or handing it over to the Russians, Peter Thiel was involved every step of the way. These are bad people. Some of these people just don't care about the outcomes and how their systems, how their platforms infect and destroy other systems. And this is just comical. In case you're not aware of Peter Thiel, of course he wants to inject himself with young people's blood. Of course he does, because life extension. That's what these. If I can't cheat the system enough, I have to actually break the way life works. Some people are just evil. Do not work for this son of a bitch. So, lots of bad things are happening in tech. That's no surprise to you. That's absolutely no surprise to you. What you need to realize, though, is there's lots of good things that happen in tech, and neither of those things can happen without your labor. All right, where and who you choose to work for really matters. It really matters. This, from the Google walkout back, I believe it was November of 2018. Don't be evil. But I want to make it perfectly clear. we should be trying to avoid situations where we have to walk out on strike. There are a number of things that I would rather happen than you having to be in a room with really bad people, or you having to get together with a group of really good people to hold the owners of a company accountable by striking. There's steps that we can take. The biggest thing that I want everybody to understand is that all of these situations could and can be avoided if you provide space and you have the backbone to force really difficult conversations. Mike Monteiro talks about this in his new book, and I'll mention this a little later, in the book a little later, but he talks about this in the terms of design. You're not just hired to do the work, you're hired to offer your counsel. And your counsel are these hard conversations. And it helps to have these hard conversations when the room is full of intelligent, diverse people. Because the question's always, how do I do X? When the situation is Y. I'm a new person, I'm a person of color, I'm a woman, I'm a person with debt, etc. How do I do the ethical thing when I am one of those things? I'm a person of color. How do I stand up in a room and make my spiel without ending up on my back, ending up ostracized by the group, ending up out without a job? So the first thing I'll say is, as one of those people, all of them are equally valuable to me. Those points of view should be valued. Now, I understand they sometimes are not, but they should be valued. I want you to walk into those rooms understanding that the position you're in should be a valuable one because nobody else in the room has it. You're bringing a unique perspective. But I also want to acknowledge that many of us do not feel comfortable or safe expressing those positions. So you're going to need more support. And by more support, I mean this guy. This is Mike Monteiro. Mike's a advocate for ethics and design. He's an advocate for design. He's an advocate for designers. He's an advocate for users. He's just an all-around giant asshole banging on the table for all of us. Now, he wrote a book, Ruined by Design, came out recently. And something very striking about this quote. We can't agree on how we should approach these problems because we can't agree on a code of behavior. Yet, organized crime, by the very nature of its word, is organized, more so than designers. It's very striking. Very striking. And, of course, Mike has followed this theme. I mean, I picked up design for the real world because specifically it was like the foundation of design as a job. So Mike's been at this for a while. And he created this designer's code of ethics. You probably have picked up on the mushroom cloud motif at this point that this is something that Mike did. It is something that in his new book he references it and says, "Please go steal this thing. Go steal this thing." It's been translated into numerous languages. You should go steal it. If you want to do yourself a real favor, go buy the book. In the book, he's printed it out. It's in the book. But I would encourage you to go clone this and begin augmenting it for your own use at your company. Make a pull request. Go say, "Hey, Mike, I got I like this, but what about this?" Participate in this thing. So let's walk through some of the. Actually, let's just walk through the whole damn thing because they're all important. And I call this Montero's code of ethics. He probably wouldn't appreciate that because he wants it to belong to the community, but I'm going to give credit to the author here. First of all, you are a human before you are a designer. So you should feel a duty to protect your fellow humans more than you should feel a duty to protect your job. You are responsible for what you put into the world. That should ring evident that that's directly from Victor Papanek. You value impact over form. This is why I'm shifting everything to focus on system. How is this impacting the world? How is this impacting users over what's it look like? How fast can we get it done? I want that system thing thought out before you take a step forward in the design process. I want you figuring out, okay, what system is this operating in? It's vitally important, particularly now. This is something I referenced earlier. When you get hired, you are not just hired to solve a problem. You're not just hired to push some pixels around. You are hired to speak up and offer your counsel. You may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't have a lot to offer. I'm a young designer. Don't have a lot to offer. I'm not really from this particular field. You are designing products. You're designing for solving problems. You are researching those things. You suddenly have a lot of expertise in this space. Offer your advice. It's required. It's part of the job. You welcome criticism. This is really hard for new designers. New designers are worried that they're going to fail, and any criticism feels like a judgment that you have failed. I'm looking directly at you, new designers. Criticism is how we level you up. For older designers who fight criticism, this is more about ego. You think you've figured it all out. Design moves too fast for us to feel like we have it all sorted out. Criticism that's coming in, it's meant to basically keep you from embarrassing yourself, to keep you from making a big mistake and releasing something that isn't worthy of being released. You should welcome criticism because it's going to protect your ass. You should strive to know your audience. You should know who you're solving the problem for. You should find out if they believe it's a problem. You don't believe in edge cases. Montero makes this point in his book when he talks about Facebook, and 1% is like the edge case. Well, they have 2 billion users. 1% would be like 20 million people. That's not an edge case. That's a country. Figure that out, okay? Design to the edges. Design beyond the edges. It's required. You're part of a professional community. This means don't shit on each other. Okay? Don't go out and bash somebody on Twitter because they made their logo wasn't quite up to your standards. You have no idea what they were up against. Go out, offer helpful criticism. Go out, listen to people. Go out and talk to people. Be open about your shortcomings. Seek advice. One of the best ways you can build a community is to seek advice from people. Mike also talks about diverse and competitive fields. And he specifically says, I want to win the job because I know I'm the right person for the job. And to know that you're the right person for the job, everybody has to have an equal chance. Promote the world that you want to see. If you're in a situation where you can hire, go out of your way. Go out of your way to hire people that don't look like you. Okay? Well, my last job, one of the beautiful benefits I had was it was remote. So I was able to hire people not based on a geographic region. And when you can do that, you can really find yourself with a very diverse pool of people. Very happy to say that I was able to maintain a 50-50 male-female ratio, sometimes bleeding over. And I was also able to bring in people that were disproportionately underrepresented. And that's very important to putting out a quality product. And taking time for self-reflection is key. And the reason this is key is without that moment of self-reflection, you're likely to just keep producing the same crap over and over and over again. If you're going to spot flaws in your own game, it's going to come in periods of downtime. So bake that in. Bake that into your routine. When you finish a project, take a day. Take a day to walk through it and find the areas that need improvement. That way, when you go into the next project, you're better suited to move forward. Now, I know what you're saying, particularly if you're a person of color or you're the new person on the job. You're like, oh, that's all nice, but how the hell do I do this? Where are the tools? What advice do you have that I can actually go into a meeting room and use? So, yes, we're trying to solve problems. And this is the problem. This is the problem. How do I, as a woman, as a person of color, as somebody who really needs a job because I've got a lot of debt, how do I deal with the situation? And the situation can be whatever you want it to be. It's typically going to be along the lines of, I think we're making the wrong move and I need to bang the table. How do I do that? Because you're still sitting at the table. You're still sitting there with that group of people, or maybe you're sitting with that group of people. And it's really bad if everybody else looks the same except for you. So the question I want you to start with is really simple. And it allows us to move away from the fiefdoms that typically infect our corporation or our organizations. Engineering wants to protect this, or marketing wants to protect that, sales wants to protect this. Ask yourself how the system could be abused. It's really simple. It's safe to ask that question because it implies somebody outside the room is going to abuse this system. And typically that's true. However, it also invites people to elevate their concerns if they believe that internally somebody is going to abuse the system. But they won't mention that outright. So we need to build in some safeguards for that. The first thing I need you to do is I need you to shake up the room. If the room looks a lot like you, or if the entire room looks similar aside from you, I need you to go get other bodies. Because this is an exploratory exercise. It does not require great domain knowledge. You do not have to be an expert to participate in determining how a system could be abused. You need perspective, and you need a brief. Once provided a brief, a person with a dissimilar background can offer you a perspective that you've probably not considered because you don't walk in their shoes. So shake up the room. You need different points of view. The second thing, and this one's straight from Chip and Dan Heath's book Decisive, is finding a way to make room for individuals to think and to express themselves. Everybody gathers as a group, and this is I speak this is something that I speak from particular pain about, because I've seen this fall on its face before, and it sunk a company. Gathering as a group is great when you're trying to generate ideas. And this is what's typically known as a pre-mortem. All right, we're going to go through a pre-mortem. If this falls on its head, why? If this fails, why did it fail? We're going to pre-mortem this because we want to make this actionable. We want to see what's the thing that's going to cause this to fail. And the easiest way to do this is to have everybody sit down and write out what their concerns are. The moment that you talk about them out loud, you just go around the table and say, okay, what's your concern? What's your concern? The moment you do that, people go on, oh, that was the idea I had. Nobody wants to look stupid. Everybody wants to be really protective. But when nobody can hear what the other people are thinking, you write down what's really your concern in your head. Then you have somebody go collect those things up, put them on a board. If this is remote, you can use something like Miro and have everybody put their thing on a board in a digital form. And then you begin talking and discussing what everybody saw. And that's really where you end up with something like this. We're creating an affinity map for what our concerns are about system abuse. This is a highly, highly valuable task. And that allows you to begin the discussion from a place that allows people of diverse backgrounds to discuss a thorny problem with level heads around. Because everybody has had a chance to express themselves. Everybody is expressing themselves in a manner where your tone of voice isn't getting in the way, what you're wearing isn't getting in the way, who you are, how you do your hair. That's all to the side. The little post-it notes are on the wall, and now you can begin your discussion. 3 things have happened to your group of people. You've put a value on diversity. You said, hey, I need different perspectives in the room. You've managed to get a group together and yet avoid groupthink. And then you've promoted idea generation. Nobody feels like they've been shut down because somebody says, oh, that's a dumb idea. No, it's on the board. It's on the board. And every idea in that room matters. People feel more valued. They feel like they've been included. Go back to Montero's Design as a Job book if you want to get in under the skin of what inclusion can do for the quality of a project and how that works to persuade people and bring people around. Once people feel included, the morale of the team goes up and everybody begins to take ownership of that thing. This is what you need to do. Not only to protect your position, but also get everybody on board. And frankly, the whole reason we're doing this is to avoid the unethical situations that could pop up. I'll take just a moment. Now, there are some things that you will be asked to do that are straight up bad, and you know they're bad from the word go. Systems control how the world works, and your designs can alter those systems. The question you have to ask is, am I actively taking part in something that's going to be a positive or a negative? Now, Donella Meadows writes, our drive for limitless growth could eventually disrupt many well-functioning local, regional, and national global systems. What she's talking about is when we do things out of a desire for profit and we do not care about how they impact society. Uber did this. We're talking about Greyball. And I want to explain a little bit how Greyball works. So we have the two-sided economy that we've talked about before. And we've talked about how Uber's pricing could be exploitive. But there's another way that this system could be abused. And when I first heard about Greyball, I worried specifically about, Greyball, that must be where they tell people that they don't service a certain neighborhood, or if they see you're black, they charge you twice as much. I was thinking in terms of those things, like they're going to avoid certain regions or certain people. And I was half right, because Greyball actually avoids likely government workers in certain municipalities. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why would they do that? Well, there are certain places like Portland, Oregon, where Uber does not have the license to operate. Some municipalities require a license for a company to operate. Uber doesn't have that license, so they would have a demand come in. They had a database built of phone numbers, credit cards, and all these things that they felt were linked likely to a government employee. And to avoid a sting or a place where they could get fined for operating, they would deny service to anybody who came back as a likely government employee in those municipalities. This is bad design. This is negatively impacting a system. This is thwarting government regulation. And of course it was found out. Of course it was. You can't do something like that without somebody taking offense to it. And now they're facing a federal inquiry, particularly in Portland, into the Greyball tool. And the Greyball tool is a thing. It's not like somebody made that up to get Uber in trouble. No, it's a thing. So when, Montero speaks about this, he says, you can't feign ignorance. You can't feign ignorance that ethics is part of your job. You build things that impact the world around you. You have to build them ethically. Otherwise, you're not really a designer. And there are many instances now where doing this, taking these steps, could land you in jail. The federal inquiry into Uber will come back and they will ask, okay, who inside your company authorized this? Who participated? Mike's got a very very prevalent item on a worker from VW that augmented the system to fake emission results. The person got 40 months in prison. This can send you to jail. Which brings us to Edward Snowden, somebody who has been who's currently in political asylum in Russia, of all places. Edward Snowden, just to bring you up to speed, he leaked government documents back in 2014 when he found he uncovered government wrongdoing. I'll go into some of that. There's lots of questions here, though, about him. Some people have referred to him as a genius. Others have said, Snowden was just a low-level contractor. He wasn't much of anything. None of that really matters. What matters is that Snowden worked for the government for about 7 years. All right? He worked for the CIA in some capacity. The question is, why did he leak classified information? And there's two theories that I want to uncover for you. One, he saw something that he did not ethically agree with. And I could see how that might end up with a treasure trove of classified documents being released to the Washington Post and the Guardian, but I don't actually believe that is the case, because typically speaking, when we see something we don't agree with, we don't blow a whistle. We just walk away. It's just like, you know what? I don't like what's going on here. I'm out. I don't have any ownership stake in this. I'm out. I don't want to be part of it. The second theory is that he created something that later became abused and was unethically used. And I really believe that that's the key here. So for all the people that say, oh, he was a nothing guy, he didn't really have any impact on anything there, he just stole some documents and left, I don't believe that's what typically happens. What typically happens is you create something, you see it being unethically used, and then you get pissed off. you feel a tug or response, like it's my fault this happened. I've got to shut it down. And how do I shut it down? He had a Frankenstein issue. All right, Frankenstein isn't the name of the monster. Isn't Frankenstein. The name of the monster came from the doctor who created the monster, Dr. Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein. And regardless of whether you go the old school Victor Frankenstein or the Gene Wilder Frankenstein, we can all see how a doctor creating a monster could want to ultimately be the person that shuts that monster down. And that's where Snowden's at. So let's look at Snowden's monster. So we have an ISP, or an internet service provider. And that internet service provider has a lot of inbound communication and outbound communication. The ISP itself does not store information. It's a routing. It routes from one to the next. If a court order is received for surveillance, the NSA, National Security Administration, can drop a dragnet over those inbound communications and pick out the ones that are related to the target of that case, of that court order. And basically the sense here is, I need to know what's being said and when it's being said regarding terrorist attack, drug charges, whatever. There's a person we want to monitor, and they have the ability to go through and pluck out key identifiers saying, oh, this is a communication going to such and such. We need a copy of that so we can see what's going on. That's how the system was designed to work. Go get the court order. We can drop a dragnet on all communications globally and pick out the ones that we need. Okay? That's how it was designed to work. That, unfortunately, is not how it's being used. All communication is captured for later review, creating this giant feedback loop. Every second, every bit of communication, including this video, being captured and thrown into a database somewhere. Now, what is done with that, because you need a gigantic amount of computing power to live analyze all that, it's not being live analyzed, it's just being captured. So this storage ultimately begins to grow larger and larger until you get to a point where it's like a black hole. This is Jane Bamford's The Shadow Factory. And as you can see, Senator Bob Kerrey, important and disturbing. This revealing, provocative book is necessary reading. Bamford goes where the 9/11 Commission did not fully go. Nothing escapes the NSA. Everything goes into it. And because of that, now you can get a court order, and you can, instead of trying to capture everything moving forward, you can go back in time and see the target of the court order. But you can also see you. You can also see your family, me, your friends, everyone. Everyone, including people overseas. The Brazilian government, the Germans, everybody. This is particularly disturbing because while the court orders are required to dive in and see things about Americans, there is no court order required to go in and dig around and view things about people who aren't Americans. And that's particularly devastating to the privacy of people around the globe. So the NSA was abusing the legal system. The question is, who banged the table? Or who was going to bang the table? Who was going to risk their job, their livelihood, because of this? And the answer was obviously Edward Snowden, who gave up not only like where he worked and his job, but he actually gave up his citizenship. He does not have a passport. He is now in asylum in Russia, a place that prior to leaking these documents, he probably had zero interest in going. But because of his effort, things started to slowly change. As Snowden said in this Guardian interview, people are still powerless, but they're at least aware of what's happening. That's a very powerful position to have. Snowden inspired tech giants to change. Even if the government wouldn't change, tech giants have made it harder for governments to spy. You might be asking, well, who? Apple. Apple's firmly planted a stake in the ground long ago, fighting back against government spying. Tim Cook, I would say that this has been Tim Cook's standard issue in the wake of Steve Jobs. Apple has shifted from product innovation to security. And regardless of how well they've done at that, I think they've been far more consistent than the other tech giants. Because the next question you can ask is, well, did anything change at all regarding security when you see something like this? Not hundreds, millions, hundreds of millions of Facebook user records leaked on an Amazon server. This is like the world's scariest Mad Lib for data security experts. Is anything safe? No. Absolutely nothing is safe. So, to say that you're going to jump out there and be the next Edward Snowden is a bit far-fetched. Okay? It's a bit, I'm going to be the next James Bond. Spy feels like a spy novel. I'm not asking you to be that. Snowden grabbed our attention because of the size. But there are small Snowdens literally in organizations all over the world. Case in point. The Uber thing? How do you think the New York Times found out about Greyball? How do you think people find out about these data leaks? It's because somebody inside is leaking that information out. Somebody inside is tipping off reporters and saying, hey, something bad is happening. And if there's anything to keep you from becoming the person, the pawn in the game that does the unethical thing to win points with your boss, know that somebody's going to tell at some point. And it might just be you, as seen here. Some Uber employees who knew about Greyball, presumably the same ones who leaked it to the Times, had qualms about whether it was ethical or legal. Somebody's going to tell. Don't get caught up in things that you don't want to be part of. Ultimately, the question that all of you have to ask yourselves is, do you want to be around for the short term or the long term? Is this something that's just getting you by, or do you want to have a career? Because if you want to have a career, long-term success is directly tied to a respect for the systems that you impact and to doing ethical work. So, I want to encourage all of you, if you've been watching this, I want to encourage all of you to jump over to the New Pragmatic Slack channel. You can subscribe, like, watch, interact, and grow with us at newpragmatic.com. You can also sign up for the Slack channel right there on the home screen. It's literally right here. Apply for access now. Join our Slack channel. Come in and have conversations with us. We're in there every day. Today we're talking about chronotypes. No telling what we're going to cover tomorrow. But jump into New Pragmatic. We are here to redesign your future. And thank you. I'll talk to all of you soon.